Hello kindred longevity lifestyle designers, this is Zach here with secretsoflongevity.com, and I'm going to do a Q&A video today. Just wanted to mention it out there that if you've sent me questions in the past, whatever form of social media it was on, whether it was an email, personal message, comment on a video, and if I haven't answered your question, then please do send it again if I've missed it by any chance. Or perhaps you've asked a question that was more pertaining to a unique health condition, and I'm sort of reluctant to answer those because I do like to stay on topic of this channel. That's all I like to focus on longevity, and I definitely think there's other people more qualified to look into other issues if they're pertaining to more specific type disease states. I give some broad general information at times on certain things like cancer or diabetes, and I'll more than likely direct you to either information from the Hippocrates Health Institute, from Gabriel Cousins if it's more related to depression or diabetes, and then depending on what it is I'll send you elsewhere or recommend a book or other knowledgeable health practitioner or educator that could educate you on that subject. So with that being said, if you do have a health challenge, we can work together, and you can always get a personal consultation with me. I do email or phone consultations, and you can find that at the link below. There's a link that will take you to my page on my site. It's very easy to set up. You send me an email and we'll get that going. And this really is pertaining to anyone who has sort of like a whole mass of questions or one really broad, personalized question that encompasses a lot that's just way beyond what I could do in any sort of video format here. The first question, which I believe was from maybe up to a month ago, just been slow in getting these Q&A videos out, but it was from Thomas, and he was asking about weight and maintaining weight or building weight on a raw food diet. And first of all, the end part of the question was just some personal questions about my own weight and why I want to gain weight, and what my reasons behind that are. And that personally, yeah, like you said, there is sort of an image of raw foodists and vegetarians, although I'm not vegan, but vegetarian or people eating predominantly plant-based foods are skinny, sort of weak, etc. So yes, to a certain degree I'm looking to dispel that myth, just proving that myself so that when I'm out in the world people can see the results that I get, and really it's about work, not just simply eating a certain way that's going to help maintain some sort of body mass. Largely people that eat high amounts of animal foods, sort of more beyond 40% of their diet is animal foods, almost in all cases that I've seen, over time, especially as they get older, that turns to body fat. And so if you think of a steak that's marbled, where it has a lot of fat in between the muscle strands, so you're eating a piece of meat that's the muscle of an animal, if you are eating meat, or at least you've probably seen it at some point in your life, but there's marbling throughout the meat. So if you think of someone who's big, yes, they could have body fat sort of under their skin, which would prevent the muscles from standing out, but you also have to consider that there's fat inside the muscles that sort of make muscles look bigger as well. So really you have to go by strength and also body fat percentage. So one thing I'd recommend you do is get a body fat percentage checked, because you were mentioning you've lost weight since incorporating more and more raw foods into your diet. You've gone down, I think, up to 15 pounds over the course of time, whether that started just when you started doing raw food or when you went vegan first of all from vegetarian. And I'd get that checked now just so you know where you're at. You've got a good baseline, and over time you can sort of track that. If you happen to lose more weight, you can actually see, okay, well, this was body fat that went down, not actual muscle mass. Or perhaps you're going to see you start losing muscle mass, and you know that's a sign that you need to probably either eat more calories or exercise more, or both. And also you said, do I feel too skinny? And it's not that I felt too skinny, it's that largely I wanted to increase muscle mass for strength. I'm interested in strength. I've always done strength exercise predominantly. Over the last 5 years of my life has been more of an intense interest as opposed to when I was younger, doing a lot of soccer and more cardio. So yeah, that's been my interest largely, and it's not so much about self-image. And the weight you said you're at, I think that's a fine weight. I would look at your BMI, if you're 5'10", and the weight you said, you might be slightly under, but again, BMI isn't the greatest tool to look at. It can be off for some people depending on their, not just their body height, but also their body composition. People are built differently inside as well, and that can indicate different things. So is there a period of time that you're going to lose weight when you're eating raw food? And yes, a lot of people do experience this. To what degree it's attributed to how much calories they're eating or not, that really depends, because I've heard a lot of people talk about that, or at least a lot of raw food experts who've been doing it a long time do say that your body does break down. You start to lose tissues that were made with less optimal material. Now, if you've been eating a healthy diet for a long time, even if it was more cooked, and it was organic and largely plant-based, you're going to not have massive amounts of tissue to lose. When I went raw from vegetarian and even vegan cooked food, I didn't lose any weight. I mean, my weight fluctuated a little bit, but it never moved more than 5 pounds. I wasn't going down to like 120, 110 pounds for my size. I stayed around 130, 135. When I've done periods of more cleansing type diets, like when I got back from Hippocrates, I think I had lost 2 or 3 pounds. But I would have lost more had I not been eating more nuts and seeds, which they give to people who don't want to lose weight from having too much of a cleansing thing going on. So I was eating more than most people when I was at Hippocrates, just because I had that intent. So if you're interested in gaining weight, the number one thing is definitely going to be doing strength training. Just looking at the program and weight training that I'm doing right now could be of help. Doing body weight training, first of all, to get the endurance up is a good thing. And if in time you choose to join a gym, you can then build muscle mass, at least the size of the muscle. You'll also definitely be building strength as well. And that does 2 things. You're going to be increasing bone density and then also lean muscle mass, which in the long run is very healthy. Because you have that extra tissue, should the need ever arise in your life that you're in a situation where you're not going to be able to get enough nutrition, it's almost like reserves in that way. But it's also strong and prevents breaks later in life when you're quite advanced in age, and it's generally better for moving around in the world because you're going to have less strain on your joints, etc. if you've got a strong enough body. The next question is from Children Guild, and they're asking what my perspective is on Ayurveda and I think even Chinese medicine, where they recommend boiling milk before consuming it. And actually, let me rephrase that. The Chinese actually do believe in raw milk, although much less do they recommend the consumption of dairy, probably because it was less available in China. But it was used obviously more often in India, except they recommend raw milk, but then they say boil it and add spices to it. I think this is just cultural, I don't want to say superstition, but just tradition that just gets passed down. You also have to remember that India, with its location in the world, it's more southern than certain other parts of the world. They have more exposure to a lot of parasites and virulent bacteria and diseases because it's much warmer. That's just a natural fact of being closer to the equator. So depending on the poverty level and where things are situated in the world, it's probably going to be safer to boil the raw milk from a cow that might have been exposed to something, in a river. If the cow's wading through a river and it's got parasites in it, especially in the udders which are in the river, that would be a reason to boil the milk before drinking it. In that case, I'd probably just say avoid drinking any sort of milk whatsoever, because we all know that pasteurized milk is not optimal for the body. Adding spices to milk can be great. Warming it up can even be great if you want to sort of have it as a warmer drink or beverage, if you're mixing some herbs into it. However, boiling it definitely does coagulate the proteins. You lose the lactase enzyme that helps digest it, and you also damage some of the finer fatty acids that are heat sensitive in the milk. So just like my opinion on Chinese medicine and Ayurveda in terms of cooking food, and how everything must be cooked, at least different people say different things within those communities, but in large part Chinese medicine is big on cooking everything, even salads. I definitely think there's a lot of misinformation there. It really does come out of a tradition where people were, for example, traditional Chinese medicine was medicine to help the lowest level of people in the society. So they're poor, so they're going to be eating a lot of grains, a lot of beans, cooking everything because sanitation wasn't that good and you need to eliminate all the pathogens that were on everything just from it being transported around and not having proper processing conditions for different foods. So that's, in my opinion, where all this hype around cooking came from. So if we just think about that and consider where things came from, we can see that if we're living and eating food from a very clean environment and has a much better method of preparation and getting it from its source and cleaner, we can know that we can consume it in its raw state without the negative effects that are associated with what would have happened in the past, which was the origin of traditional Chinese medicine and, in some cases, Ayurveda. And a related question, which I just saw on my Facebook profile, I hadn't even moved into my document, which I had all my questions in, was from Thomas again. I had answered his question previously, but he was asking again about Vata constitution, and his friend, who's an Ayurvedic practitioner or is familiar with Ayurveda, has recommended that he consume more cooked foods to complement his constitution. And again, that, in my opinion, is coming from that framework where people believe that that just has to be done because it's been passed down, but also because it's coming from a place in the world where there was poor sanitary conditions, where it was more needed for certain types of people with the proper constitution to consume foods that are prepared in a certain way. In this case, it's cooked to complement their either slightly thin constitution, slightly airy, or if they're larger and more thick-boned, you're going to need to do something slightly different. And while I think there's a lot of insights that can be gained from looking at Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and in Chinese medicine, their own constitutional system, we have to take it with a grain of salt. And there are people out there talking about how you can follow these guidelines, but still eat a raw food diet. And I definitely recommend looking into Gabriel Cousins. I believe his book, Conscious Eating, is a great one because it goes into the constitutions and how you can follow them and still be on a raw food diet. In Vata, you can eat a 100% raw food diet if you want to do that and still be fine. You do, in my opinion, need to prepare things to open up the cell wall of really tough greens. So if you're eating kale just raw, you're probably not going to get that much from it. Whereas if you're eating sprouts, they've just been sprouted, they're a young plant, they're tender and juicy, and you can get everything from them. But with certain types of plant foods, when they have a really thickened cell wall and they're not digested easily, you need to do one of several things. Either juice it, dehydrate it, that breaks open the cell walls. In my opinion, eating kale chips, you're going to get more from them than you would just eating kale you just picked from the garden straight. A lot of people would think that's heresy in the raw food world to talk anything about that. However, it's just a biological fact that you cannot digest plant cell walls when they're that advanced and thick. You can to a large degree with young tender greens. So like I said, you can juice, you can dehydrate, you can ferment, so that's like making sauerkraut. It's still a raw food, it's just been processed in a way that opens up the cell walls. You can add salt to it, so if you're doing like a marinated, I guess it would fall under the category of marination, which usually would include tamari or some other high salt food, which helps burst open the cell walls of the plant food. So by doing that, marinating in oil and some sort of salty substance, you're helping break open the cell walls. And that's the whole purpose of putting salad dressing on a salad, is it helps open up the cell walls of certain foods, and it makes the nutrients more digestible. And there's actually been studies on this, comparing people eating a salad with no salad dressing to people eating a salad with salad dressing. When you eat it with a salad dressing, you're getting more from it. Another thing would be blending. That, of course, opens up the cell wall. So we have all these different options that we can do and still eat raw, but get more nutrients from the plant cells that, in some cases of some very tough types of vegetables, are difficult to get at. Demanding to be free has asked, if cuts aren't healing fast enough and your skin breaks easily and you seem to have sort of a thin skin thing going on, what would be a solution to that? Number one, I would start being tested for a number of things. Talk to your actual physician, so like a family doctor, about this to get some blood tests done. I'm not entirely sure about what types of diseases this would be linked to, but there are things that this could be related to. Just get that out of the way, bring that up, and your doctor might pique their interest or not. I mean, if you're very healthy, you're obviously probably not going to have something going on, minor or major. It's just something that is a health issue that you just want to clear up through whatever means. So number one is going to be looking at your hormone levels, because if you don't have high enough free testosterone, you can actually get thin skin, and that's sort of a thing as you get older that gets related to old age, but really it's low testosterone levels, because testosterone thickens your skin, interestingly. That's why it's often thought that men have thicker skin than women. And this isn't me being sexist by any means, this is just sort of common knowledge that if men have thicker skin they can take more in terms of if they were out in a scenario where they're hunting, fighting, they're going to be more able to resist injury in those situations. And this would just be an adaptation that humans have experienced over the long term. So if you're a male with thin skin, I'd look at your testosterone levels. You'd also want to look at introducing more silica, sulfur, basic protein into your diet just to give your body enough to build healthy skin, including some fatty acids that the skin's composed of, such as the omega-3s, is a good idea as well. Now the other thing I was saying, which can be related to checking with your physician, is if you say that you're having trouble with cuts healing properly or fast enough, you want to talk to your doctor to find out if you do have something going on with blood not clotting fast enough. So if you have slightly thin blood, now obviously you don't want to take any drugs for that, but you just want to get that cleared up. If you happen to be deficient in the things that build blood platelets, so platelets are the things that help clot our blood or a wound when it's appeared on our skin. We obviously don't want clotting inside our blood, so the opposite end of that spectrum is you clot too much and you can end up having a blood clot that causes a heart attack or a stroke, which would be if it's closer to the brain. And actually, He Shou Wu is something that can help regulate that. It helps disperse excess clotting, but it's also building to the blood and taking blood-building herbs like He Shou Wu, Romania, goji berry, either as an extract or the whole berry in a tea, or even whole berry taken raw in a smoothie, blended up in some way. You can also snack on them, but you'll also often find, because they're so dry, they're even drier than you'd find raisins, they'll end up going right through you and largely going undigested and kind of being a waste. So you should always either soak goji berries overnight so that they're really plump when you do consume them, or blend them obviously, or make a tea out of them. And you can find links to some of those herbs below. I highly recommend actually doing teas with these, so I've got links to the Mountain Rose Herb site where you can get all three of those types of blood-building Chinese herbs. Next question is from someone. It's a multifaceted question, but I felt drawn to answer it because it has been related to some of the hot topics I've covered in the past in some of my videos on phytoestrogens and male health and getting your androgen levels up and bringing your estrogen levels down. And this person, who's going to remain anonymous, has been experiencing gynocomastia. Despite having low body fat percentage, they're having breast tissue development to some degree. And that's not uncommon with people who have sort of estradiol out of control in their body, while at the same time having their testosterone levels depleted through phytoestrogens, xenoestrogens, which would be contributing to higher estradiol levels, but also testosterone converting to DHT, sex hormone binding globulin, or getting bound up by that, or again converting into that estradiol, which will further bring that level up. Pretty much the best thing you can take is nettle root. So this is a tonic North American herb, and this is something you'd want to take daily in a reasonable amount for a period of time until this issue goes away. So what this herb does is it's an aromatase inhibitor as well as a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, and both of those are responsible for the conversion of free testosterone into DHT and then also estradiol. Some people are going to tell you to take something called saw palmetto, which is another herb. However, I don't recommend it in your case. That would only be something that you'd take for issues such as balding or enlarged or inflamed prostate gland. So I just stick with the nettle root. It's powerful enough, and it isn't going to actually affect your DHT levels as much as saw palmetto would. So DHT is a hormone that's okay to have. It's only that we want to reduce that to a large degree if we're experiencing something such as male pattern baldness. So your other issue related to this was inflammation, and this was in your hands, but it can almost certainly be connected with other things going on in your body. And you're referring to consumption of too high of omega-6s in your diet. And you talk about the certain foods you were taking that you thought were high in omega-3s but are actually more predominant omega-6s, like avocados, hemp oil, almonds, etc. So yeah, all those things do have more omega-6 than omega-3, but they do have some omega-3, so it's not as bad as some people consuming a diet high in grains and beans, which is even higher in omega-6 and even lower in omega-3. So staying away from phytoestrogens, you can still get plenty of omega-3s. I don't recommend cutting out all nuts and seeds because there's, except for perhaps a few that are high in phytoestrogens, such as the sesame seed and flaxseed, obviously. But the things like walnuts, which are almost purely omega-3, they're greater amounts of omega-3 than the other foods, where like hemp, which is often touted as a source of omega-3s, but it's got a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. So you need to start looking at, like I said, walnuts, chia seed, the other things you just mentioned, algae, and there's other sources of omega-3 that you could probably find just by doing some searches on them. But yeah, you're going to want to stay away from the flaxseed, which would be one alternative, but that has the phytoestrogens, which you're also trying to stay away from, at least the ones that are very high in the phytoestrogens. You also touch on the thought that some people have told you to consume cruciferous vegetables and onions and garlic because they can counter the effects of the gynocomastia and the inflammation actually as well, but they're in some cases on the charts of phytoestrogens. However, they're androgenic foods. So while a food might have phytoestrogens in it, it might overall have a more androgenic effect, and that would be because it's actually got certain phytochemicals in it that are more powerful than the limited or moderate amount of phytoestrogens it contains. So garlic is a great food to take sporadically if your constitution can handle it. Broccoli sprouts is another great one. It's got certain factors that will help your body release excess xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens and help get those out of the body. I'd also recommend perhaps a passion flower extract. That's good for binding to estrogen receptors, but it's completely neutral. It won't affect them in the way that a phytoestrogen or a xenoestrogen might. So it helps, again, get these excess estrogens that are unwanted and in excess out of the body. And they're also of a synthetic nature and could cause other issues like that. So with focusing your diet on the greens, which are all androgenic, by the way, green foods are for the most part androgenic. Things like cucumber, celery, spinach, they all have these anabolic qualities in them that either help bolster testosterone levels or help prevent testosterone from converting to estrogen, including that nettle root I mentioned, avoiding the foods high in phytoestrogens like flax, soy, sesame, garbanzo beans, black beans, hops, which is found in beer. Definitely stay away from hops, black cohosh, licorice, and any of those things that you see on those charts that are way up there in the high numbers in terms of phytoestrogen content. So yeah, avoid those. Take in the omega-3s from plant sources that are not high in the phytoestrogens, and in time you're going to see these things start to reverse themselves, especially if you're on a raw food diet and you're going to go through the cleansing and other things necessary for your body to begin to get back to homeostasis. And Paul has asked a question in regards to consuming colostrum for extended periods of time, whether that's okay or not, and how this affects IGF-1 levels. And he's made reference to the idea that you can take in unlimited amounts of both colostrum and things like enzymes, and there's certain foods and supplements, at least whole food based supplements, that you can take almost unlimited amounts of, and they're actually more beneficial the more if you take. It's just depending on how much you want to use of them and whether that's for a specific issue or not, and because these things obviously cost money, you want to be strategic in your use of them. But he's just wondering if there can be a negative effect from extended periods of time consuming colostrum, and I've never heard of any story of that happening. I mean, there might be rare cases of people having individual reactions to something that just doesn't work for their body. However, colostrum is a very versatile food that pretty much everyone I've heard of that takes it does well with it. So unless you're having a strong aversion to it, for whatever ideology you have in your mind in regards to that food that comes from an animal, but if you don't have that going on, then go for it and consume it for as long as you want. And let me know if you have any negative reactions down the road that you would think would be attributed to this. IGF-1 in a food form is not a dangerous thing to consume, despite what some people are saying online, just to sort of propagate fear around this and misinformation. They're actually quoting things from propaganda type sites. There's no studies on food-based IGF-1 that show it having a negative impact on the body. In fact, colostrum has been used in cancer treatment, like post-cancer actually, which would be the time that you'd never want to take IGF-1 if IGF-1 were to cause cancer. So yes, there are studies that show IGF-1 in an isolated synthetic form, which is vastly different than a whole food of any type would be and what effect would have on the body. And they have these studies that I'll post one below actually, because there's one I can think of right now where they're using it post-cancer to help the person recover and rebuild. So again, these studies on synthetic IGF-1 and human growth hormone and all this that affects and helps cancer grow, which would be something we want to avoid anyways because it's synthetic and has largely undocumented effects on the body, and it's a very new thing which hasn't been consumed for many thousands of years by humans. However, the whole foods are fine and they're very healing and regenerative, we know. Same with deer antler. You're going to take this for months and months and months, and in large doses even, and not have the negative effects you'd get from taking the synthetic form of that one isolated compound in that food. So both colostrum and deer antler have free IGF-1 in it, but they have a number of other cofactors in there as well, which really supports much broader action on the body, helps negate any negative effects that might be coming from that. And they're also living and not from a synthetic source, so they're not going to be confusing electromagnetically to the body, and your body's going to be familiar to them at some point in your ancestral past. So you can again find links below if you're interested in either deer antler or colostrum, as they have those regenerative anabolic compounds in them. And you want to do this experiment yourself and take them in a large amount for 3 months and see what happens to you. I can say from my own experience from consuming these for over 3 months now myself that there are no negative effects that I have experienced. So post your questions below, send them to me in email form on any social networking avenue, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and I'll get to them in a future Q&A video. Remember, you can set up a consultation with me anytime that we can really dig into any health challenge you're currently experiencing. Remember to check below for the links to the things I mentioned in this video. And with that, I'm going to say take care and embrace life without limits.